Welcome to Art Ed Radio, the podcast for art teachers. This show is produced by the Art of Education, and I'm your host, Tim Bogatz. All right, guys, so today I'm really excited about the podcast, and we're going to dive right in. We're going to be talking about differentiation today, and there's a lot to talk about, and my guest today, Shannon Lauffer, is notorious for talking a lot. So with that beautiful introduction, Shannon, how are you?
I'm doing so well. How are you, Tim?
I'm doing really well. Like I said, I'm excited to talk to you. I think there's a lot to cover, and that's why I just kind of want to dive right in to everything that we need to chat about today. And a big reason I wanted to have you on is, differentiation is something that's really important, something we need to talk about quite a bit more than we do. And secondly, you're going to be at the Art Ed Now conference presenting on differentiation in just a couple of weeks. So can you give us just a quick preview of what your presentation is going to be about, and maybe tell people why they need to tune in to what you're saying at Art Ed Now?
Absolutely. So I'm super excited to present at Art Ed Now this summer. My presentation this time is called Differentiation Decoded. So what I found is, when it comes to the art room, it can seem unattainable to differentiate for our students. And I want to try to make the whole process seem accessible and make a little bit more sense for art teachers. It's super easy to say that art is naturally differentiated. My students, work at their own level whenever they create art. But we can also be super intentional about it. So in my presentation, I'm going to give you guys some strategies that you can apply and resources you can use immediately with your students.
Okay, that's awesome. I mean, for everything that you said there, because, I think we do need to talk about it more. I think people need resources. And, a lot of times we do fall back to that, just art is naturally differentiated. And we kind of stop there because I feel like people have this kind of vague understanding of differentiation, just kind of this overarching idea of what they should be doing where, I need to do some things differently for some of my kids. But can you explain differentiation a little bit more in depth? And I guess more important than that, can you talk about why it's so important for us to strive for that in our art room?
For sure. Essentially, differentiation is not like a quick fix. There's no packaged curriculum. It's really just a way of teaching. So what we're doing is providing different avenues for learning and different entry points. So what that means is, for any given topic, some students have absolutely no exposure. Some students might have a little bit of experience, and some may have already mastered, that concept. So it's based on assessment, which, for art teachers tends to be, something that we're not super crazy about, but it's going to be.
Yeah, it's scary.
Absolutely. But the great thing about differentiation is that it's ongoing assessment and it's formative assessment. So this doesn't mean every day we have to give a test, every day we have to give a quiz. But we're checking in just to see how students are progressing through material. So it's kind of about leveling the playing field. Looking at education and art education as not necessarily equal, but more equitable. So because each of our students is super different, we wouldn't provide them the exact same learning experience because they're all not the same human. So they're each unique. And then through differentiation, we kind of have an opportunity to celebrate their differences and make learning accessible. And I guess for me, the most important part of differentiation, we start talking about this and it's oh my gosh, it's so much to do. But to keep focused, you always circle back to your objective. So no matter how you're differentiating, no matter what you're doing, you always go back to your objective and say, okay, what's the most important part of what I'm teaching? And then how can I allow students to access that?
Okay, that's a really good way of putting it. And I want to kind of dive in a little bit deeper to what you said there, because, I think it can get overwhelming. Like, a lot of art teachers aren't super familiar with those assessments, the formative assessment, and that's why I say it's scary for a lot of teachers.
Totally.
But, you talk about how there is so much that we can do, but we just kind of simplify it, go back to that objective. But when we're doing that, like, how, I guess the question is, how do you keep from getting overwhelmed? Like, when you're trying to differentiate all of these ideas for your kids, I know it can be super difficult. So can you talk more about how you simplify things and maybe help teachers see that it doesn't have to be quite so overwhelming?
So we'll start with like the flip side of the coin. You could easily say like, okay, I'm going to differentiate every single objective for every single lesson, for every single class for the entire year. And like, that'll just never happen. We have to keep realistic and find the most important pieces of our instruction to differentiate. So the number one thing to remember is that this doesn't need to be happening every minute of every single day. However, there are three major ways that we can differentiate in our teaching, which is through content, process, and product. And I'll go a little bit more into that here in a second. And then our students are going to engage with learning in three main ways. So readiness level, so how much they know, their interests, and then their learner profiles. So that's kind of like our multiple intelligences. Okay, let's talk about content. When we differentiate through content, we're really going to focus on this formative assessment. So we're getting ready to start a unit. We pre-assess our students. Why? Well, okay, so let's say we're doing a unit on symmetry. And so you pre-assess your students and you realize that like literally every single student already knows what symmetry is. And you're like, oh no, if my objective was to teach symmetry, like this doesn't make any sense anymore. So maybe I take that pre-assessment and push it further and say, okay, 3/4 of my class understands bilateral symmetry. But when it comes to radial symmetry, they're totally lost. So then you can break your kids into two groups. One group is going to learn about bilateral symmetry. The other group is ready to move on to radial symmetry. So we're taking that concept and expanding upon it for our students that are ready for that next step. So it's kind of like a video game with different levels. Like you have to unlock level, complete level 1 to unlock level 2. And some of your students are going to like stick in that level 1 until they master a concept. And it might take an entire year or an entire unit for them to master that concept. Then you have some students that are ready to like unlock level 3. And like, that's the moment that we're really digging into value added differentiation. So talking a little bit about differentiating the process, this is like how your students learn. So this is like the way they prefer to learn or the way they can learn. So what I notice is, as art teachers, we rely really heavily on whole group demonstrations. And like, that's one area that like, maybe we can differentiate that a little bit easier. So maybe we offer 3 entry points for that process. Like, there's a slideshow presentation where students can access that on a personal device and kind of go through the process at their own pace. Maybe I flip my instruction and there's a video demo that they can watch. Or then maybe for my students who really need those clarifying questions and who are really going to need an opportunity to engage with me over the content, then for that small group, I can offer a small group demo. Then when we consider the process of creating artwork, like our students working independently all the time, well, maybe for your students who are a little bit more social, like maybe you allow them to work in groups of 2 or groups of 3, or they create a collaborative piece where they fit together. So these are different ways that you can easily vary the process of learning.
Okay, so I always struggle with the issue in my classroom where, I want kids to collaborate. I want kids to do group work, but a lot of kids aren't comfortable. I don't know if they're antisocial. Maybe they just don't like working with other people. Maybe they just feel like their work's better independently. Do you push those kids into different ways of learning? Like, do you think it's important to get kids outside of their comfort zone for the sake of differentiation? Or do you think it's better to let them stay where they're comfortable and kind of create what and how they want to be creating?
This is a super good question. So we talked earlier a little bit about circling back to your objective. So I think this is a great opportunity. So like if my objective for this project is that students are going to collaborate, then like, yeah, I'm going to push my students out of their comfort zone and we're going to find a way to support them in that collaborative, setting. But if the idea is not collaboration, but I have students who would do better or would excel in a collaborative environment, then that's my differentiation piece. So again, it's circling back to that objective and saying, okay, is this a requirement of the product or the project? Or is this just kind of an opportunity for students to explore something that's going to make their learning more valuable?
Okay, that makes sense. And I like that. And I did want to ask you one other thing, just kind of about the process. I've heard you talk about kind of thinking about the complexity of the project too. Can you expand on that a little bit more?
Yeah, I think this is another great way to differentiate, especially when we're talking about process. So for example, let's think about, so we're starting a drawing project or a sculpture project. And I'm going to tell my students, you have to make 6 sketches. And so some students are going to blow through that and they're going to create 6 sketches and they buy in. But for some students, and I know that this is an issue for us as art teachers, for some students, they're like, I can't do it. I want my first idea. My first idea is my best idea. So, okay, how do we support that? So the objective is we want students to expand upon their ideas and not just settle for their first idea. So let's make this less complex than make 6 sketches. What if we tell students, okay, create 2 sketches. Now choose the one that you like the best. And then we say, okay, for this sketch that you like the best, you need to add 2 things and change 1 thing to make it better. So now we're differentiating for this student who's struggling with 6 sketches, but we're still meeting the objective of their expanding upon the idea. So this goes back to that idea of like equitable, not necessarily equal. Because your students who are creating those 6 sketches, like, cool, we're going to let them rock. They're going to make their 6 and move on.
Like you said, just kind of circling back to, what is the objective is a good mindset for people to kind of stick with as they're thinking about those things.
Yeah.
And then you talked about content and process. And then the last thing you said you wanted to talk about was product with this. And is that just kind of how students are demonstrating their learning, like what we're ending up with?
That's it. So the product is the final product. So as art teachers, I think this is the easiest one for us to wrap our heads around. So like the simplest way we can do this is differentiate the product through media. So you don't necessarily have to open up your entire art room, but you might allow students to experiment with a few media and then determine which is the most successful for them. They can also, if you're looking for a little bit more of a challenge, have students propose their own designs. So if you consider the artistic process, like if you're covering a unit on like human figure, you ask students to propose a plan. So you would develop some kind of a proposal sheet that walks your students through the steps. And maybe they want to explore the human figure through photography, or maybe they want to do sculpture or painting or drawing. So again, we're allowing students to kind of explore their interests, have different entry points, but still demonstrate an understanding of the objective. Another great way to differentiate the product is to offer learning menus or choice boards. So this is a great way to kind of present different options. So you're controlling a little bit more of it than these open-ended kind of proposal sheets.
Yeah, those are some great suggestions. And I think, again, just some awesome things, some awesome ideas for teachers to keep in mind.
For sure.
We need to take a quick break here to talk about one of our awesome sponsors for the Art Ed Now conference, which is Uli. So, Shannon, question 1, yes. I know, have you gotten your swag box for the conference?
I got my swag box.
Question 2, what is far and away the best product in the swag box this year?
So the Uli watercolors are so legit.
Did you say that because they're awesome or because we're doing an ad for Uli right now?
No, for real. I said it. They're super awesome. They're such a great product.
I love them. It's like this pearlescent blend watercolors, and they're like really vibrant, but like just a little bit metallic, like this subtle, like metallic color, which I absolutely love. And my kids and I have been painting with them like crazy lately. And it's been a fun couple days since the swag box showed up. Okay, but Uli has established itself as the home of color for creatives of all ages. It is their mission to provide fun and unique products like these awesome watercolors that inspire creativity and self-expression for all. And the all is very important to Uli, and they believe that everyone deserves the opportunity and the tools to express their creativity. And one really cool thing that I love about Uli is they partner with Adopt a Classrooms to support and empower teachers and students by providing supplies and materials needed to help students learn and succeed. So everyone, I know they're awesome, and it's a great program, and it's really, really cool that they're a part of that. So everybody, make sure you dig into your swag box for those watercolors. Make sure you check out uli.com, and a big thanks for Uli being one of our platinum sponsors and helping us put on the Art Ed Now conference on August 2nd. So hopefully we will see you there. And one other thing I wanted to talk about is the interest surveys, or like the interest inventories that I know you love to use. So can you explain kind of what those are, why you like using them, and I guess how teachers can use them in their classroom?
Absolutely. So interest surveys are like my favorite way to kick off the year or kick off a semester. And here's why. First, you're communicating to your students, like, I want to know you. And when we have, 400, 500, 600, 700 students, starting to build that relationship is so important and also like impossible. So you hand out these surveys, kids get the feeling of like, okay, do you actually care? Like, okay, you kind of care. And then you have access to these information from like hundreds of kids. So it gives you a quick in to like who they are, what they like, what makes them tick. I also like to really ask the question of like, do you like art? Or what's your favorite part of art and what makes you nervous? Like a lot of kids, especially looking at like our upper elementary through middle school and high school, the idea of being in an art classroom is either A, their worst nightmare, or B, something that gives them so much anxiety. So if we kind of allow them an opportunity to be like, yeah, I'm really not into art, that then becomes like, okay, that for me, it's like, that's my kid. I'm going to get them. I'm going to win them over by the end of the year. They're going to do one thing that they love. The other thing I love about interest inventories is you can use them for kids to keep in their sketchbooks. So, if you're starting to transition into more student-directed choice as a result of your differentiation, you have these kids who like cannot generate an idea. Mm-hmm. If you give them an interest inventory, they can fill it out, keep it in their sketchbook, and then swing back and remind themselves like, oh yeah, that time that Miss Lauffer asked me like if I could be any animal and I said I'd be a kangaroo, like maybe I can use that for this art project. So it's going to give them a jumping off point for when they just, can't generate those ideas.
Yeah, you're just full of good suggestions today. So
I am. What can I say?
I know. I'm so glad that you're on the podcast. So one other idea that always kind of seems to cause teachers some stress and some anxiety is how to adapt an IEP or a 504 plan, like specifically for the art room. So I wanted to do kind of a speed round here, and I was hoping like maybe can I list some of the more common accommodations that we see, and you can give me some ideas on how to adapt those for the art room?
Yes, please. I think this is so important for art teachers because, we have hundreds of students and dozens of IEPs. And then we dig into these documents and it's like, none of this applies to me. But like, so not true. So much applies. We just have to be a little bit creative about how these apply to our students.
Okay. Well, as art teachers, we need to be good at being creative. So
Yes.
let's see how we can do. Okay. So number one, additional time on assignments. I see that all the time for kids.
Absolutely. So like the obvious answer is like, oh, I'll just extend the assignment deadline. But like, okay, how can we be more creative? Like, what if we decrease the size? Or if fine motor is an issue, maybe we can't decrease the size. So we circle back to the objective. What is the objective? Is our objective that every single artwork has to be completed? Probably not. And if that is your objective, we need to rethink it. So
Yeah.
we want to ensure the student meets the objectives, not necessarily completes the project. And that's what we're going to assess.
Okay, cool. Number two, extra time with transitions.
Yep. So for our kids with special needs, transitions are like the worst. They're unexpected. They throw off our routine. So my favorite thing is to use timers. Like we are going to take time, which is like one of the most abstract concepts for students, and we're going to make it concrete. We're going to provide a visual, and they're going to be able to access this timer throughout the course. So we're preparing them for the transition. And then we are actually going to provide extra time. If you think it's going to take 1 minute, give them 3. If you think it's going to take 5 minutes, give them 7. Because the first couple minutes of that transition might be them mentally preparing to transition.
What about providing space or movement for breaks?
My favorite. So at some point in our teaching, teachers decided that like students have to sit all the time, which to me is crazy because I can't stay seated for a whole day, let alone like 40 minutes. So the best way to meet this is like let students stand while they're working. Now, again, thinking about abstract things, the idea of space is super abstract. It's like, oh, well, stay in your personal space. Like, what does that mean? So we're going to create visual boundaries for students. You can use masking tape or duct tape on the floor to give them a space to move around. You can do that on their actual workspace, like on the table, create that visual boundary. Or for your kids who need a little bit more energy output, create a visual boundary, in the back of the classroom that they can go and like get their energy out. So if you're presenting and doing this long demonstration or a lecture about, your art history, this student can kind of move around back there and they're going to be able to attend to you better.
Next one, and this is, I don't know, the one that always bothered me because it's always so vague. Preferential seating.
Oh, preferential seating. Like, who's to say? What's the preference? So the first thing we have to determine is like preferential to what? So I don't know about you, Tim, but when I'm teaching, like I don't have a front of the classroom. Like the whole world is my
I'm
oyster.
everywhere.
Absolutely. So what I need to figure out is like, okay, does that mean that I need to move around less and stand next to this child when I teach? Or does this mean that their preferential seating is like further away from art supplies because those are a visual distraction for them? Does it mean they need to be closer to the exit in case they get stressed and they need to walk out? Does this mean that they need to be further from noises? If that's kind of a sensory issue for them, we want to put them, their preferential seating is away from the sink. It's away from the blowers. These are all things that we can take into account when we're determining like what the heck is preferential seating.
What about frequent rest breaks?
I need a frequent rest break. In fact, I think I need one right now. I'm just kidding. So breaks are so underused. I think, in the classroom, again, we somewhere along the way decided that like when you're in the classroom, you have to work. But breaks are so good, especially for your students who are working on stamina. A break is going to be your best strategy. So it's all about self-regulation and then teaching your students, if you do something for me, I do something for you. So some students might only be able to attend to a task for like 5 minutes or maybe like 2 minutes. So we want them to be successful. We don't make them work until they melt down. We say, okay, first you work for 5 minutes and then you get a break. And then we can move up to 6 minutes. First you work for 6 minutes, then you get a break. If we wait for our students to melt down, we're teaching them that the art room is like a sad, terrible frustrating, awful place. And that's obviously not what we want.
Yeah, absolutely. And if I can just throw one thing in, like breaks are good for all of your kids, not just kids on a 504, kids with an IEP. Like it's worth it to just let your kids get up, walk around, see what everybody's doing and get back to their seats. Like that's, like you said, it's very, very underutilized.
Absolutely.
And then the last one I wanted to ask you about was alternate evaluations. Again, something that is very vague and very frustrating for teachers. Like, what should this look like?
Yeah. And so like, again, thinking about assessment, this doesn't mean that like, oh, I have, for every test I give, I have to make an alternate test. Because as an art teacher, unless your district is requiring you, you're probably not using a lot of tests. So this is all about our formative assessment. So the key for this one is going to be to think about like Bloom's taxonomy. So, which is also another great tool for differentiation. So some of your students might not be at the level where they can synthesize information or construct a unique answer to a problem, but they might be able to identify something out of a field of 3. So, let's say, thinking about, okay, my objective is, maybe I'm teaching whatever, perspective. So I pre-assess for perspective. My student has no idea what it is. So we work through this project, we're learning, and I realize that like my student cannot draw in perspective successfully. They might have spatial awareness, kind of issues going on, whatever it is. But when I show them a field of 4 images, they can identify the image that shows perspective like 3 times out of 4. So like, that's it. That's your alternative assessment. The student can identify even if they're not able to synthesize the information. Alternate evaluation.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So no, that's an awesome explanation. So thank you. And we've talked way too long already, but I feel like I need to ask just kind of one last thing that,
my fatal flaw.
Hey, it's all been good. It's fantastic information. So I think we're in good shape. But I want to talk a little bit more specifically about how we can tie all of these ideas together in the art room. We've talked about content and process and product and evaluation. But, let's say we're going to do a portrait lesson, for example. Okay? And maybe I want to differentiate that by using different media or maybe teaching some kids additional portrait concepts or maybe how I assess it. Okay, so if we're looking at a new unit, we're looking at something that we're going to teach, like how do you, like you personally, like how do you think about where to start with differentiating?
Yeah. So again, like broken record, we're always going to start with a pre-assessment. So that helps me to understand what my students already know about the topic. So, all right, so we're talking about portraiture. Okay, so some of my students understand facial proportions, like, they divide our face up with lines, they draw their kind of hemispheres, and then like some have absolutely no idea, like the eyes are on the forehead. Maybe I notice that some of my students have a more stylized way of drawing. So I'm going to tap into that student interest. I'm going to pull some different artists to reference as I work with them. We can absolutely vary the media. I mean, but let's get a little crazy. Like if the concept is demonstrating the proportions of the face, if that's my objective, like could my students still master that objective if they sculpt a bust or if they create a relief? Does it have to be 2D? If your objective is 2D, then like, sure, we stay drawing, painting, whatever the media is there. But, always look for that way to push yourself creatively. Essentially, differentiation is all about empowering your students. We're empowering them to be successful. We're empowering them to think like artists. Show me that you understand portraiture. Show me that you understand portraiture. And, whatever the objective is behind that, expression, identity, proportion, whatever. And then explore it in a way that makes sense to you.
Oh, that's really good. That's a good way to finish it right there. No, that makes sense in a very succinct way. Just empowering kids to think like artists and allowing them to explore those concepts in a way that makes sense to them. I think that sums it up perfectly. So, Shannon, we'll end it there. Thank you so much. It has been spectacular talking to you.
Hey, likewise.
Have a good rest of your day, and hopefully we will talk to you again soon.
Sounds good, Tim. Thanks so much.
Thank you to Shannon for coming on the show and sharing so many incredible ideas on just how we can make differentiation work for us and work for our kids in the art room. Because, I mean, let's face it, differentiation is hard. It's really difficult because, we teach hundreds of students, and it can be really difficult to know how to provide individualized supports for all of them. And the good thing about listening to Shannon, talking to Shannon here, is that she has so many creative and just art-specific examples of modifications, accommodations, interventions, and everything that we need. So hopefully this episode can help you find some success with tips for managing, all of the different differentiation strategies that you're going to want and that you're going to need to implement in the art room. Art Ed Radio is produced by the Art of Education with audio engineering from Michael Crocker. We are just over a week away from the Art Ed Now conference, so go sign up at artednow.com. Use the YouSave20Now discount code. That's YOUSAVE 20NOW, YouSave20Now, to take $20 off the conference registration. We will see you on August 2nd for that. And as always, thank you for listening. We will talk to you next week.